Chief Executive John Lee vows to work with new LegCo to solve Wang Fuk Court post-fire issues. Government proposes the Urban Renewal Authority to have a bigger role in building renovation works. Hello and welcome to TVB News. I'm Melissa Hekalea. The new Legislative Council held its first meeting today, and the government announced a series of policies and measures to improve fire safety and other areas in the aftermath of the deadly Taipo fire. In his address to the council this morning, Chief Executive John Lee stressed he will listen to the suggestions of lawmakers and ensure healthy interaction between the city's executive and legislative branches. Timothy Lee tells us more.
Chief Executive John Lee gave his address at the first meeting of the new legislature today.
The burden on the shoulders of the 8th term of LegCo is heavy. There are much work to do. The pressing tasks are to support the relief work. At the same time, we need to boost the economy and develop the economy.
Regarding the cooperation between the executive and legislative branches, the CE said it must include active integration into the nation's overall development. Such work consists of the speeding up of the development of the northern metropolis under the 15th five-year plan, as well as the post-fire relief and reconstruction work in Wang Fuk Court. The CE raised 3 points of expectation from LegCo. They include the implementation of executive-led principle with patriots administering Hong Kong, working for the benefit of the nation's interests and the society's interests, and not chasing after personal political gain or glory. Lee stressed he's happy to listen to opinions from lawmakers who disagree with the government's actions, urging those who disagree with certain policies to point out the problem and come up with alternative suggestions. Chief Executive John Lee emphasized he looks forward to working together with members of the new Legislative Council to raise Hong Kong's competitiveness on the global stage. He added that the government and lawmakers should work together to improve residents' livelihoods. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Chief Executive John Lee says the executive and legislative branches should jointly address various issues spotlighted in the fatal fire at Wang Fuk Court in Taipo and pursue accountability. The government has also moved multiple legislative amendments to step up the regulation of building maintenance work. Jackie Lin reports.
Chief Executive John Lee led principal officials to attend the first meeting of the 8th term Legislative Council. In a speech, the city leader says the tragic fire at Wang Fuk Court revealed the need to reform various systems and policies that have been in place for many years. The government would review recommendations from the independent committee meticulously.
For those who should be held responsible, whether they are civil servants or not, and regardless of their offices, they will be held liable according to the facts.
Chief Secretary for Administration Eric Chen then moved the motion on post-fire support and reconstruction efforts with multiple legislative amendments. They encompass strengthening the regulatory powers of the Fire Services Department with the department's approval required for the switching off of fire safety systems. Also proposes the amendment of the Buildings Ordinance with more spot checks on building maintenance, the improvement of the regulation of construction methods and procedures, the implementation of site safety improvement measures, and strict prohibition of smoking at all construction sites. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
To address bid rigging issues in renovation and maintenance works, the government is rolling out an enhanced version of its smart tender scheme. Under the scheme, the Urban Renewal Authority will monitor government-subsidized maintenance works. Jackie Lin again.
The tragic fire at Wang Fuk Court in Taipo has renewed concerns about the city's bid rigging woes. The government has proposed to reform the Urban Renewal Authority's Smart Tender Building Rehabilitation Services Scheme to include stricter requirements for project consultants and contractors to join the pre-qualification list with stronger disqualification mechanisms. They can only take part in the tender after being included in that vetted list.
We will look at whether they have conviction or disciplinary records. Those contractors will also have to go through background screening with the police or the ICAC.
If the project is funded by the government, the URA will join the tendering, evaluation, and decision process of the winning consultants and contractors. The URA will also offer suggestions for non-government funded projects. She says the contractors will have to report to the URA should there be a change in the project scope or cost overruns. Edward Low, president of the Hong Kong General Building Contractors Association, says the industry hopes to have clearer vetting criteria for the pre-qualification list, including which crimes are targeted, such as bribery and fraud cases, and which roles should face tighter background checks, say licensees, directors, shareholders, or key employees. Low notes that when homeowners' feedback is considered, authorities should also gauge their objectivity and whether they come with any malicious intentions. Records reveal that the smart tender scheme takes nearly 2 years on average to complete tendering work. The URA has been in the red over the past 3 fiscal years. Can it handle the new duties? URA's non-executive director Michael Lee says the most worrying thing is whether the URA's resources and manpower can implement the various newly added preventive measures fully to prevent corruption and bid rigging. Jacqueline, TVB News.
The government will strengthen safety measures at construction sites and will establish safe distancing for scaffolding. Following the fire at Wang Fuk Court in Tai Po, the government ordered the removal of scaffolding from over 400 buildings undergoing renovation. The Development Bureau says it will review the regulatory requirements for different building materials and strengthen them as needed. Authorities will also establish safe distancing for scaffolding and regulate it through legislation. The fire also raised concerns about the risks of smoking on construction sites. Secretary for Labor and Welfare Chris Sun said authorities are revising relevant ordinances to implement a comprehensive smoking ban on construction sites. Deputy Financial Secretary Michael Wong, who is in charge of the resettlement of residents of Wang Fuk Court, said in LegCo that the residents' final choice will not be restricted by their questionnaire responses. Nazvi Karim with more.
The government had earlier distributed questionnaires to Wang Fuk Court residents to collect their preferences for long-term resettlement, with several options. These included purchasing property rights from the government, exchanging units, resettlement within the same district or across districts, and redevelopment on the original site. Deputy Financial Secretary Michael Wong said the long-term housing arrangements should be based on empathy, reason, law, with empathy taking precedence. As to questions about why redevelopment on the original site would take 9 to 10 years, Wong explained that it involves complex issues of demolition and property rights. He also pointed out that the option of rebuilding in neighbouring Chung Ar Road West has the shortest completion time. It is expected to be ready for occupancy in the second half of 2029, and the surrounding living facilities are quite complete. Meanwhile, Secretary for Housing Winnie Ho said after assessing the level of fire damage in the 7 Wang Fuk Court buildings, the probability of demolition is very high as the internal damage is serious. A Wang Fuk Court resident said rebuilding on the original site would take too long, making it difficult to choose such an option. Another resident said she prefers to exchange for another subsidized home ownership scheme unit in the Tai Po area. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
Still ahead, Canadian leader Mark Carney starts his China visit in Beijing. Greenlanders say no to U.S. rule before top Danish and Greenland officials meet with J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio. And MTR showcases its work in promoting ecological conservation. Welcome back. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has embarked on a 4-day state visit to China, the first visit to the country by a Canadian leader since 2017. Trade issues will be on the agenda. Beijing is said to be approaching talks to ease Ottawa's heavy tariffs on electric vehicles from China in exchange for relief for Canadian canola exports. Danny Zhou has details.
Carney, who departed from Vancouver on Tuesday, is expected to hold separate talks with Premier Li Qiang and Zhao Lezi, chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, on Thursday. The Canadian leader is scheduled to meet President Xi Jinping one-on-one on Friday, after their last meeting during an APEC summit in South Korea last year. During his trip, Carney will be accompanied by key cabinet members, including Canada's Foreign Minister Anita Anand, Minister of Industry Melanie Joly, and Minister of Agriculture Heath MacDonald. In a social media post, Carney noted a pragmatic and constructive relationship with Canada's second-largest trading partner will create greater stability, security and prosperity on both sides of the Pacific. It is reported that the two sides will touch upon topics such as trade, energy, agriculture and international security, in what experts say is a critical step for Canada to re-engage with China after nearly a decade of diplomatic tension. According to the Associated Press, the Canadian government has been working to diversify trade and cut dependence to the United States amid the Trump administration's threats to annex Greenland. Some experts believe joint efforts will be made by China and Canada in safeguarding the international order and expect them to reap mutual benefit and win-win outcomes. Danny Zhou, TVB News.
Japan's defense chief Shinjiro Koizumi and U.S. Indo-Pacific Commander Samuel Paparo met on the sidelines of the Honolulu Defense Forum earlier this week, sharing security concerns with a pledge to further enhance cooperation between their countries' forces. The Japanese defense minister visited the command's headquarters in Hawaii. In a speech, Koizumi cited mounting security challenges from countries attempting to unilaterally change the status quo in the East Sea and the South China Sea by employing coercive instruments such as economy, resources, and cyberspace. He highlighted efforts to advance deterrence of the Japan-U.S. forces in southwestern regions like Okinawa. Koizumi also placed emphasis on multilateral cooperation with countries including South Korea and India, and elaborated on the realization of a free and open Indo-Pacific. In the months following Sane Takaichi's Taiwan remarks, the rift between Beijing and Tokyo has deepened over a fighter jet radar lock incident and China's ban on exports of dual-use equipment to Japan. Chinese officials have contended that the ban is completely legitimate and legal and pointed out Japan is not a party to the South China Sea issue, urging the country to reflect on its history of aggression in China's Xisha and Nansha Islands. A death toll from the train disaster in northeastern Thailand has risen to 28. Officials from Nakhon Ratchasima province said a construction crane, which was used to build an elevated high-speed railway, fell onto a moving train, causing the train to derail and catch fire. Dozens of rescuers searched the wreckage for people trapped inside. Thailand's transport minister expressed condolences to those who suffered losses in the incident. He said he has ordered an investigation. U.S. federal agents dropped tear gas and sprayed eye irritant at activists during another day of confrontations in Minneapolis. 6 days after the shooting of Renee Good, protesters continued to defy officers who deployed flashbangs into crowds standing across the street from a federal building in the Minnesota city. With the Department of Homeland Security vowing to send 2,000 more agents to tackle the protesters, the state, together with the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, sued the federal government to stop the surge. Meanwhile, Washington said it will end temporary protected status for immigrants from Somalia, the latest move in President Donald Trump's mass deportation agenda. Trump spoke in Detroit and claimed that the ICE raids in Minnesota have resulted in the capture of hundreds of killers. Greenland's prime minister said that his country chooses Denmark over the United States, even as U.S. President Donald Trump insists Washington will eventually take over the island. Greenland residents are also telling Trump to keep his hands off their land. Danish Foreign Minister Lars Rasmussen will meet with his Greenland counterpart and U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance to discuss the Arctic island. Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said, if the U.S. takes Greenland by force, it will spell the end of the NATO alliance. Greenland's Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen said the territory will never be owned, governed, or be part of the U.S. He said it will remain under the Kingdom of Denmark. Trump says he wants the island to expand U.S. security, saying that Russian and Chinese ships pose a threat. Greenland residents have dismissed Trump's fears.
I think he should mind his own business. What is he going to do with Greenland? He speaks of Russians and Chinese and everything in Greenlandic waters or in our country. We are only 57,000 people. The only Chinese I see is when I go to the fast food market. Every summer we go sailing and we go hunting, and I never saw Russian or Chinese ships here in Greenland.
A fire broke out in a residential unit in Cho-Yu-sen in Kwai-chung, and a man was confirmed dead at the scene. The windows of the affected unit were blackened. Police received a report at around 12:30 p.m. that a fire had broken out in a lower floor unit at Kai Him Lao in Cho-Yu-sen. Firefighters arrived and extinguished the fire. A 78-year-old man was confirmed dead at the scene. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. The MTR Corporation has joined hands with the University of Hong Kong to promote ecological conservation at the Lok Ma Chau wetland. As part of a pilot program, the MTR and Hong Kong U will collect 1 year's worth of relevant data for research to determine possible solutions for sustainable management of the wetland. Timothy Lee has more.
Located just next to the MTR's Lok Ma Chau station, the 32-hectare wetland has been under the control of the Public Transport Corporation since the station came into effect in 2007. Over the last decade, the MTR noted there has been a boost in the number of bird species visiting the site by 25%, reaching some 280 species and including endangered ones such as the black-faced spoonbill. Among the company's conservation measures was the development of a fish hatchery site, which will remain operational for 1 year as part of the pilot program to collect conservation-related data. Other efforts include the setting up of floating islands to preserve water quality and raising freshwater mussels as a food source for birds. However, with the ongoing construction of the MTR's Northern Link, reports say the project would affect around 3 hectares of the wetland, with only around 1 hectare set to be compensated. This is Chan Heng Keung, MTR Corporation's Chief of Operations Engineering Services and Innovation, emphasized the MTR maintains communication with different stakeholders of the nature site to ensure conservation regulations were met. In a bid to strengthen conservation education, the MTR rolled out an interactive educational program involving over 50 secondary school students to learn about plant cultivation at the Lok Ma Chau wetland site. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
That's the news. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.